That
Recording
actually,
in progress.
I didn't do a whole ton. Yeah, I didn't do a whole ton of preparation. Actually, one of the only few things, uh, of course, I have been percolating on a bunch of other ideas such as eurythmy and stuff. But one of the few things I wrote was about that audio mixing stuff and how it's an interesting thing that like one cop out you could say I like the music like that, or that's the way I meant it to sound, and like that can be, or it can also be like a test of one's ability to like, it's like if I were to play a bunch of like hardcore breakbeat, really heavy music, it's like it's almost like a test, like can you vibe with it? And but at the same time, people can also use this as an excuse when, it's like that's maybe not they really weren't able to kind of convey what they were more aiming at or something like that. I don't know. It's just interesting stuff. I was talking with that same guy, Mick Mosiv, who did the audio mixing about this last night. We were talking about like, how does one judge art and stuff like that. It's all very interesting in light of what you've been talking about in terms of like what makes a powerful song, let's say, or like a potent song or something, like yeah, I don't know. We don't have to go into that, but it's just another thought that came to mind, because I've gotten lots of comments like, the music's too fucking loud. And it's like, it's like, there's many different ways that one could respond to that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, I mean, one thing that occurs to me here is I find that you know it's possible to vibe with basically any kind of music if you put the effort into doing so. And I think I've noticed this thing where people the kind of music that a person listens to often kind of speaks to the degree to which they're interested in kind of playing with their own consciousness, right? Because it's like, yeah, anybody can turn on the radio and feel a 4/4 beat and a like basic major chord loop and a
Hmm.
diatonic melody. I mean, it's just like it asks nothing of you because
Hmm.
it's just like that collective memory is just there. You don't have to dig deep for it. It's
Hmm.
just present. Um, which is fine, but then it's like the further out you go, the more you're kind of having to take your consciousness and kind of bend it into the shape of the music. Like to be able to like really like sit down and listen to like progressive black metal shoegaze, like you really gotta like work to find that wavelength. You know what I mean? Not exactly my kind of music, but I think that's a pretty good example that most people would understand. Like, it's not easy music to resonate with for most people, and so it does require kind of bending oneself out of shape. So another thing that's I think important about music, and that this kind of relates to that. I I always think of the function of music as something that, like, if you think of the human ontological makeup as consisting of these various different organizational strata or layers, um, music seems to be the one thing that can like synchronize them together. It's possible to if it's possible for music to take the etheric body and the astral body and the dialogical mental body, etc., and get them to all kind of dance to the same tune. And I don't think we quite realize the degree to which that can often not be the case within our ordinary experience, within the modern world, at least, especially with the kind of fragmentation of the modern human being, the fragmentation of the human life world, which we see in the modern epoch. It's very, very easy for these different aspects of ourselves to be completely out of phase with one another. And music can kind of serve this function of bringing these things into alignment with one another. And I think looking at it that way really discloses a lot of things about music that might otherwise seem to be very, very mysterious, right? Like lots of people comment on the fact that people like to listen to sad music when they're sad, for example, right? And it seems like, oh, that's some weird paradoxical thing about human psychology. Um, but really, what's going on there, I would say, is that um, there's this kind of sublimating function that music performs, where it's able, and I think really art in general is able to do this. It's able to take something negative, something painful, something anxious, something like horror or melancholy or whatever, and contextualize it in such a way that it becomes something else. Like it's still sadness or pain or loss or whatever, but the music makes it make sense. It doesn't make it go away. It harmonizes it quite literally in the same way that you can take a melody and harmonize it with a chord progression being put on top of it. You've got kind of the same thing going on, and so it seems to me that within that context, we could see what's going on there is that there's a kind of pain that's being experienced within, I would say, the astral body, that the intellectual or dialogical mind can't really make sense of. And then the music, through kind of poetic transmutation, is able to bring those things into an alignment so that the negative experiences make sense. Anyway, yeah, and this is something
Yeah.
I really wanted to try to explore more as well. A lot of my work involves just this kind of repetitive ambient music that I just throw together and put in the background. But I really am trying to like pressure myself to get better at looking at my video essays more as kind of a like a filmmaker, almost, like where I'm not just like putting something in the background, but I'm trying to like score it with music that is evocative of what I'm trying to convey, in the same way that I use imagery and things like that. So anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts
Yeah.
on
Heard
that.
that. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of thoughts that came up. I wrote them down this time because I realized that I can't do the thing where I try and keep track all in my head. I also just saw I got a voluntary time off opportunity for work tomorrow. Thinking about taking that. Not quite sure if I should. It's always a debate. But uh yeah, very much so. The things I think thinking about the synchronizing, right?
Mhm.
Um that would I think I ultimately would love if we could figure out the intricacies of like the astral and the different layers, but I think the easiest way probably to cognize it would just be this talking about the fragmented modernity would be the mind body separation, right?
Mhm.
Where it's like like it helps us reconnect to our body, and like connecting that to the emotional experiences is like a lot of times maybe the sadness or whatever is living in our body, and it's kind of easing our minds such that we can actually feel what we feel or something like that, right? And then that made me think about this when you're talking about the darker emotions, made me think about shadow integration such that uh you might have like a nice Primrose, happy-go-lucky Christian, you know, young laddie who listens to like death metal, because it's like he's trying to, it's trying to bring those together.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and I think and there's reminds me of when I make videos that are kind of heavy. Sometimes I'll put in this uh heavier music because it's like it's kind of it's to meet your enemy, you almost have to be their capable like them. You have to be able to bear that same force that they are bringing to the fight or something.
Force is understood in relation to nature, and it is thus a power without effort. Right? Force subdues the lion, but it's not the means of the force which the lion has, but rather by a legitimized force of the higher order, which simply allows this. And once again, we are seeing how things are enacted, which might seem anathema to the Christian worldview, that they had something to do with a higher order, which implies a legitimacy. So, for it cannot be the same quantity of forces that which the lion itself has. It has to be a higher quality, right? It can't be the lion has X amount of force, and so to overtake it, we need X amount of force, because that's the same quality of force. It's a force of the below. It has to be a different quality, so we're moving from quantity to quality, okay? And thus, degenerate animality of the below obeys because of that higher quality.
And yeah, I really vibe with that idea, and that made me think about this idea of shamanic animal stuff. This is kind of a far out idea, such that people would like resonate with the wolf and embody the wolf, you know, in order to kind of integrate that archetype or whatever you want to say, right? Kind of a cool idea. And then, sorry, I'm just kind of laying it all out here, but the also this ability to resonate with the far out music, of course, it reminds me of Christ, like in terms of if we're thinking about people as songs, then it's like his ability to be all to all would be that he can go up to even the most sick or the most, you know, insane, the most demon possessed or whatever, and he can still resonate with them such that he can meet them and kind of call them out of their suffering, you know, and see them, not look away, not put them in a box, but really be there with them, you know, and that really resonates. I think that's super powerful. Really resonates. Talking about resonance. And then the last thing was right at the beginning of what you were saying, just kind of a passing thought when you were saying the 4/4 measures, how everybody can do that. I was wondering, I was like, maybe that has something to do with the 4 seasons. You know, it's like how it's kind of inevitably that becomes our standard music. I don't know if that's true all around the world or through time where 4/4 was kind of standard, but it's like it would make sense. I don't know.
I think even like across cultures, groupings of 4s or 3s, those are the most common things you're gonna see. I mean, you get some weird like polyrhythmic stuff in gamelan music and West African music and Balkan music. But even then, you've got this thing where everything is kind of groupings of 2s and 3s. So if you just have like straight 4/4 music, where the subdivisions are completely square, then you could see that as rhythmically pure lunar energy in a sense. It's more Actually, you know, this is something worth thinking about, because I was going to say it's got more of a bodily thing going on, because I was thinking, okay, lunar is a bit more immanent, solar is a bit more transcendent, but no, maybe it's a little bit more subtle than that, because now I'm thinking about it like 3s, like 3, 4, and 6, 8, like that waltz feeling. I don't know. That actually, I would argue maybe that's actually a little bit more bodily than 4/4 rhythms. And of course, you can mix and match. You can take a 4/4 beat, and then you can split the subdivisions into 3s, and then you get that like swing feel type of thing. And then you can do it. So that would be like doing a kind of vertical mix and match of the triadic and the quadratic. But then you can also do it horizontally too, which is what we see in Balkan music, where you get these like groupings of 3s and 2s, where you can have like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, like stuff like that, right? Like, so you're splitting it up into different groups of 3s and 2s. Anyway, what was I going to say about yeah, the alienation from the body? Yeah, this is important, I think, definitely, because we could definitely relate this to the mind-body bifurcation of the kind of Cartesian break from traditional Western philosophy. That's definitely something here. And we could also look at this within the context of Jean Gebser's narrative in the ever-present origin, or rather my rendition of Gebser. I've finagled Gebser's ideas so much that it's kind of like I feel like it's almost inappropriate to keep on saying that, oh, I'm talking about his ideas when I've like just completely reworked the whole damn thing, but whatever. What was I going to say about the, yeah, so you have the efficient and deficient structures, right? And so what I've argued is that with the different structures of consciousness, the transition into a new consciousness mutation is necessitated by the deficiency of, or the deficient mode of the then prevailing structure of consciousness. And what I've argued then is that that deficiency comes about due to a kind of breaking off of whatever is then the dominant mode of consciousness from the lower consciousness modes or consciousness structures, which are kind of underneath it. Right, so the mythical becomes deficient when it detaches from the magical and archaic underpinnings. Mental becomes deficient when it detaches from the mythical, magical, and archaic underpinnings, and so forth. And so within our modern consciousness, I think that post-Renaissance modern consciousness, perspectival consciousness, is about as disembodied and as embodied as it can get somehow at the same time. It's weird because on the one hand, what's really going on here is we're identifying the I, the ego, with one's private internal subjectivity as such. So you are the feeler of your experiences, basically. And so that's a very, very modern way of looking at what the human self is. Plato would have never described it that way. You see kind of similar things in Eastern philosophy, but you don't really see it in the West until really the Renaissance is where this really starts to develop. And so anyway, you end up with this kind of perspectival consciousness, which in that sense, you could say it's very disembodied, but because it can't be identified with anything bodily. It seems to be now identified with subjective interiority in this very abstract sense, which again, you can see that as connected to the Cartesian bifurcation of mind and matter. Simultaneously, however, there's another sense in which it's the most embodied modality of consciousness thus far, in the sense that it situates the sense of I, the sense of selfhood, within the immanent domain in the most thorough way.
And also the personal domain, right?
And the personal, the most particular, the most,
yeah.
And so the most embodied in a sense. And so it's like there's this double motion that's kind of yanking us apart in a sense. And yeah, we could totally see the role of music here as actually rather cosmic in proportions, because what else could possibly heal that rupture, right, other than music, which is able to bring these things back into synchrony with one another.
And not simply music and in maybe the notative sense that we think, but maybe in this more broad sense where music is kind of a fundamental principle of reality or something like that. Like, of course, the particular auditory music is powerful, but I think you could say that language is music, right, in a sense, or that's kind of two big words trying to jam them together, but I think there's probably a way where you could connect those two. And like I definitely would agree that like a deep, powerful experience of, let's say, eurythmia, right, the musicality of life, that I attest that can very much reconnect these bifurcated worlds, such that we can become even more embodied than, and but yeah, it's I lost my train of thought. Yeah.
And that's kind of the task here, I would say, is it's not escaping from the body. It's spiritualizing the body, and this is where we could talk about Jung's notion of enantiodromia, the way these things get inverted. So I've talked about this before with relation to transhumanism. For example, the way that transhumanism is kind of like the zombified form of the Christic imperative of the spiritualization of the bodily, the redemption of the bodily, because it sees the natural world as utterly fallen, right? You could look at, Kurzweil, his writings. Jesus Christ, that man has a complex. I mean, he blames nature itself for taking away his father from him. And so his whole project of transhumanism is basically about trying to like defy nature by achieving a kind of technological immortalization of the human body. In any case, what's really going on here is that Kurzweil is operating under what is fundamentally that Christic impulse towards the spiritualization of matter, but because it's lost contact with its own inner logic, its own driving impulse, it becomes a zombie, right? In the same way that a zombie it looks like a human, but it's kind of the opposite of a human in a way, because all it cares about is, stumbling around and moaning and eating brains. It's just the least essential aspects become dominant within the enantiodromic function, and it turns into a kind of inversion. Things become parodies of themselves, and this is exactly what transhumanism is. Rather than the spiritualization of the bodily realm, what we see is an attempt to mimic the spiritual through the technologization of matter. And so where was I going with this? Enantiodromia, inversions. Oh man, there was a specific thing I was going to say, and now I've completely lost it. It was about enantiodromia and things turning into their opposites and whatnot. Oh, I hate it when this happens and we're
It was about.
recording.
I know the feel. I hate that very
It'll
much.
come back. It'll come back.
I think I might be able to help you out here with it was the maybe because we were talking about becoming more embodied, and then that's when you.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. So that can invert in the sense that the instead of the spiritualization of the body, you have a complete identification with a despiritualized notion of bodily existence, right? And so this would be like, I would say a kind of Luciferic impulse in a way, because it ends up manifesting as this very like hedonistic kind of philosophy, and a very anti-realist kind of relativism where everything is just, I mean, it's Nietzsche is basically what I'm saying. It's like this idea of the bodily realm understood as pure will to power, because when you saw off the transcendental pole of the bodily, that's basically what you're left with. The bodily becomes rendered as pure desire for repetition.
Dang, yeah. I'm gonna have to chew on that one a bit. I'm not. Yeah, that's interesting thoughts though. It reminded me. I don't know how fitting it was, but that part in particular reminded me of the whole transgenderism thing for some reason. I don't know. I think after a while, I was like, I don't know if that actually fits though. But
I think it does, or at least in certain situations it does. I mean, insofar as the social contagion form of that, I would definitely say that's the case, because what you have here is the underlying impulse towards the transcendence of the gender bifurcation.
yeah, but it only can play it. But it ends up playing out at this physical level rather than like meeting your enema or something. It's
Right,
like,
because where
um,
else is it going to play out if you don't believe in the spiritual realm at all? What
yeah,
else could it possibly act upon other than the
yeah.
physiological body, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it made me also think about Steiner's whole thing about the etherization of the blood. I haven't I haven't gotten there yet, but yeah, it's an interesting thought. I was watching some Gigi videos, and uh also she was talking about how like there's these kind of step functions where like maybe one group falls away or something. Uh,
The idea that we need an external force as the impetus of our evolution is false. Not only is it false, it is dangerous as it removes our sovereignty and personal agency. In the earlier epochs, changes to the human form or evolutions of the human form were guided by higher humans. Often these humans were associated with Venus or Mercury. These higher initiates did not tamper physically with the human DNA. They actually worked with the human's etheric and astral bodies, which then in turn affected the physical form, allowing humanity to retain their sovereignty as they developed. All evolutions in this way were then dependent on the individual's personal capacity for growth. There was no development forced on humanity. Humanity was simply exposed to certain higher energies and given a chance to adapt. Any physical mutations or hybridizations done to humanity is not the creation of humanity. And the beings that have done that are not creator gods. It is simply the mutation of an already existing human stream of life on the planet. Mutating an already existing human being against their will is not creation. Where the confusion seems to lie is that there were races of apes and even ape-like people that were the result of degenerations that happened during the earlier epochs of humankind. This was due to some human souls being unable to rise up out of the lower nature during their earlier evolutionary cycles. As a result, they developed forms that were more beast-like or animalistic.
and then also, I'm not sure if I assume you didn't, but I'm not sure. Did you happen to see the video I posted yesterday about, it was called Updates, Downloads, Syncing, and Scripting. And it was about this guy who was in the Stargate program. And he was talking about how, ESP abilities, remote viewing and stuff, and how they're working on doing this via mRNA.
Telepathy and remote viewing, future, past, and present. I co-founded a genetic neuroengineering company. So we can do with an intranasal spray, we can do either CRISPR or RNA methods, RNA interference methods, and change receptors. We can downregulate, we can silence receptors in your brain very precisely. We figured, yes, someday there will be a nasal spray, probably with RNAi or some other faster acting genetic edit that will make you super psychic for a couple of weeks before it wears off. People will sometimes say, I'm involved in the paranormal.
Doing this via mRNA. And this is, yeah, it's kind of a striking thing to me, at least. And it came to mind when you were talking about the there's been a separation from the 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 way that it's supposed to work or something like that. And insofar as, maybe you're only supposed to be able to remote view things, if you have like um, the spiritual uh propriety, or like advancedness to be able to, like if I feel like there's certain moral and like spiritual things that go with that. Like you have to be able to, like if we just gave some child an mRNA thing and they're like getting flooded, and let's say this was like a really angry child, it's like, do you see, like, I don't know, this seems like a big uh topic of discussion in my opinion. It's like, I don't know what the heck is going on in this respect, like what's, you know, like, are we trying to get etheric vision, noetic insight through chabs? I don't know about that,
I don't
maybe.
know about that either. I mean, like the whole idea of gene editing, I think is there's
Me
something
too.
real fishy about that. But um,
Um,
yeah, with regards to
yeah, I'm not sure if I connected that to what you were saying perfectly or not, but it had something to do with the detaching it from like detaching the step function of separating from the lower layers as well. I don't know, but
and this is exactly what transhumanism is. Rather than the spiritualization of the bodily realm, what we see is an attempt to mimic the spiritual through the technologization of matter. Fundamentally, that Christic impulse towards the spiritualization of matter, but because it's lost contact with its own inner logic.
The human forms that are a direct embodiment of the consciousness of the earth, of Gaia, and the human form springs forth from the earth. They were not created by an alien. They are a direct expression of the earth, a personification of the earth.
But because it's lost contact with its own inner logic, its own driving impulse, it becomes a zombie, right?
I don't know, but
Yeah, and so I was going to come back to the etherization of the blood thing, which is probably the thing that I shouldn't, but also should be talking about because I don't understand it well enough to talk about it with any kind of certainty, but that's probably a good reason to actually think it through.
yeah,
Um, there's something like that going on here with the idea of the etherization of the blood for sure. There's a lot loaded into that in terms of symbology and these kind
yeah,
of metaphysical symmetries we see throughout these things. So I think maybe one window into this would be to look at the way that Steiner understands the death of Christ. So you've got the cross, the crucifixion, all that happens, and then the blood of Christ then goes down into
earth.
Golgotha, which means
Yep.
skull, and so and this isn't in the text themselves, but the mythology is that the blood then goes down into the skull of Adam, which is believed to be underneath the hill of Golgotha. And then, according to Steiner, what happens here is that this transforms the etheric body of the earth.
Yeah.
And so this is interesting. So this idea that the skull of Adam is underneath Golgotha. So the way that Steiner understands this is not that there's like a human skull like made out of bone underneath Golgotha. It's that the earth itself is the skull of Adam. That's what Steiner thinks. Because according to him, that Adam really refers to Adam Kadmon, and the primordial cosmic man prior to the scission of Adam and Eve, right? And so, as Steiner sees it, the Adam Kadmon is the earth. The earth as this like ultimate unified living etheric being And then the emergence of biological life happens as there's this kind of a succession of these splitting events whereby the animacy of the earth is kind of conceded to biological life. And yeah, you end up with this kind of tree where at every split, there's an internalization of these spiritual principles, as it were, that were once part of the earth as a whole. And so what we're left with now is an earth which is kind of dead in the sense that it has ceded all of its life principles to biological life, which means in a sense it has sacrificed itself, and it is now standing in need of being redeemed. That sacrifice needs to be fulfilled through the spiritualization of the human body, and then subsequently the spiritualization of the earth itself. So what that means then is that the transformation of the etheric body of the earth through the Christ event for Steiner means that it would be like taking like an acorn and then like you transform its etheric body, and then it turns into like a walnut tree, right? Like you're changing the morphogenetic field, let's say, which is going to guide the subsequent development of the earth. And so it changed fundamentally the developmental destiny, the evolutionary destiny of the earth as a whole.
And, yeah, I've heard bits and pieces of that, but never kind of all through. Yeah, like it reminds me also about how he thought about the sun, Christ being a sun being, and then ultimately from the grand central sun, which to my eye seems to be the galactic center. Who am I to say, though? The grand central sun, but and that's very interesting, and how Christ lives in communion with the earth. And I think that's an interesting thing about how the etheric, our etheric body is also, it's connected to the earth as well, right? Like we are, we participate in the etheric life of the earth, is I think what he said at one point, in our etheric, like as we go up into the etheric body, we are now also connected to other things, if I remember correctly, right? Where like that's how we kind of I don't want to butcher my man Steiner, but something about how like through the fact that Christ is living in spiritual communion with the earth, which would be happening in the etheric, by evolving etheric awareness, that's how we can kind of align ourselves with this morphogenetic altercation, you might say, or all not altercation, but you know what I'm trying to say there, like this generative principle, let's say, which is
process, something along those lines. Our Virgo energy is like completely screwing us up in this conversation, but it's fine. Those who appreciate it will understand. But anyway,
details, trying to pick the right words.
And so you see intimations of this within like the Catholic Mass, right? Like
I'm reminded how at the height of the Eleusinian mysteries, I mean, we don't know for sure. What we know survives from the polemical attacks of the Church Fathers, but they would say that at the height of the Eleusinian mysteries, the Hierophant would raise an ear of barley or of corn or some kind of cereal, and that was the height of the experience, in the same way that a Catholic priest raises the host above his head at the height of the consecration of the Mass. There was a similar sort of thing with this ear of grain being reaped in silence. So right at the very center of the mysteries is this acknowledgement that we are food, that we are the calories that we eat, and that there is no fundamental separation between the agricultural cycle and the human life cycle. These are intimately intertwined. And in the same way that the agricultural cycle goes through cycles of life and death. The human soul as well undergoes these kind of patterns of metempsychosis or reincarnation, where like the crops rise and die again, the human soul will do much the same.
Right, and this is the theme of death and resurrection. And most of the shamanic initiatory aspects
align ourselves with this morphogenetic altercation, you might say.
You see intimations of this within like the Catholic Mass, right? Like the wafer is the body of Christ, the wine is the blood of Christ. I mean, the implication, there's only one real plausible implication of that, which is that those things are the body of Christ because those things come from the earth. They come from grapes that grow out of the ground and from wheat that grows out of the ground. And therefore you have this implication that the earth's etheric body is
facts.
It is the resurrection body of Christ. So that's wild.
Pretty wild. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's maybe we could nitpick it a bit and maybe phrase it slightly better, but yeah, that seems, the earth is the resurrection body of Christ. I vibe with that. I don't know, it also I'm pretty sure there's folks who have talked about kind of an arrival of Sophia as well, coinciding with the Aquarian shifts, perhaps. That's interesting to me as well. Like I know Robert Powell says that, and Tom Berg said that. I think, it's very interesting, and I really like that the whole idea of the
I feel like there's a connection here, like with the blood and this kind of idea of the divine feminine that we see within Sophia.
Because you have the Holy Grail, right, which is the blood of Christ and the Holy Grail, and the feminine.
The Grail is the womb as well, right? The cup.
Very feminine.
Again, this is the moon as well, because the crescent moon, it's a bowl, it contains liquid. It's again like a human womb. And so there's connections here. There's obviously a connection with Mother Mary somehow, and then Jung's idea of the hidden fourth within the Holy Trinity. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on here, and I feel like there's something really, like there's a code to be cracked here in this idea of the etherization of the blood and what that means for like weaving all this together. But I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. It's got to be. It's got to be part of this process of reintegrating the human sense of subjectivity with the collective, with the earth, as a kind of superorganism in some sense. So yeah, I don't know. What is the significance of blood in all this? What is the significance of the heart in all this? There's a lot going on there. I mean, you see this reiterated over and over and over and over again throughout Christian symbolism, but like, what does it mean? You know?
Yeah, and also, two things. One, it reminds me of, there's also a couple things I wrote down that I want to return to. But I'll lose the things I'm thinking of if I do that. So the one is, it reminds me, talking about the etheric heart or something like that. It reminds me of the stuff you said about electromagnetic fields and how the ether may be to do with this, and how, and also the heart we know has a very strong magnetic field, right? And I don't know about very strong, like you don't have nails flying, like there's no I can't stick magnetic things to my body, but it generates a lot of electricity. We know that, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. And that would be an interesting thing there. And I like how you've talked about how like maybe changes in the electromagnetic field may have to do with the way that we experience the etheric or noetic, and so that's one angle. And then one other thing I want to say, or maybe I should let you kind of comment on that first.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I believe human blood, just because of the iron content in the hemoglobin, actually does respond to sufficiently strong magnetic fields.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's true. So yeah, I mean, and electromagnetism, there's a lot to be said here as well, right? Like, When I was talking to Gigi about this, I was kind of riffing on some of the things that I had said in one of those previous videos where I was talking about Michael Persinger's work and how it seems like it's actually like gaps or
Yeah.
holes within the Earth's geomagnetic field, which facilitate anomalous or spiritual experiences. And the data seems to back this up, Michael Persinger's data might then suggest that it is in fact the absence or quieting of electromagnetic influences which allows for the dilation of consciousness and thus the facilitation of noetic experience.
Magnetic pole shifts
are in fact correlated with greater fluctuations of geomagnetism, and that within such fluctuations, the decreases in the strength of geomagnetic fields,
Earth's defensive magnetic shield is weakening,
represents a kind of loosening of the contractive influence of the ether upon the human psyche, thus facilitating anomalous or holotropic modes of human consciousness.
more and more vulnerable to solar activity.
What this may then imply is that our current manner of implementing electromagnetic technologies may itself be directly truncating human consciousness so as to mitigate our capacity to expand our awareness beyond the confines of our immediate physical environment and mundane materialistic concerns. So what this seems to indicate then, and now that I've thought about this a little bit more, it seems to indicate that the Earth's electromagnetic field is performing a truncating function, a grounding function in the exact same way that the gravity of the Earth is facilitating the densification of matter and the keeping us, tethered to the Earth. The electromagnetic field is actually keeping us tethered. It's keeping our consciousness tethered to the Earth. And the reason this must be the case then is that those experiences that people have, these anomalous experiences, are facilitated through cosmic energies. Maybe they're also electromagnetic in some sense, but things that are coming from outside of the Earth.
More and more vulnerable to solar activity.
That are able to penetrate through that membrane, and that weak spots in that membrane tend to correlate with geographic locations with greater seismic activity, and that's why we see the placements of holy sites in Greece and Peru in the way that we do. So then maybe this could also connect to the etherization of the blood in some way. Could it be that the etherization of the blood is allowing for us to tap into those kind of cosmic forces streaming in a way that kind of bypasses that geomagnetic membrane?
Now, yeah, interesting, very interesting. I mean, I pause on when talking about the way I was conceptualizing it before you were just talking there was that this kind of loosening of the etheric or the noetic that happens when the electromagnetic fields are lessened, like a weakened, let's say, when they're weakened, that would be something more, not a direct kind of cosmic influence, but that it would be more so like just the almost like the morphogenetic of what is there already or something. But I'm not opinionated in this respect. It's just interesting to hear you phrase it as cosmic from outside rather, like it's interesting.
Well, two things here. So one, so the way I've used the word noetic, that's not really synonymous with the etheric exactly. The word I started using the word noetic as basically a shorthand for referring to what Alfred North Whitehead refers to as conceptual prehensions.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of used that term noetic to kind of tie together Whitehead's ideas about the mental poles or mental feelings together with the kind of theorizing I've done about electromagnetism, and then David Bohm's idea of the implicate order, and then morphogenetic fields and all that. So for me, the word noetic is basically synonymous with the word spiritual, but I use that word noetic because I want to be able to define my terms in very precise ways, because I'm OCD as hell. But it basically just means spiritual.
Well, you're also developing kind of a very, interesting cosmology, and with that comes new terminology, I would imagine, or at least new rephrasings of things,
The other reason I kind of prefer using the word noetic instead of using the word spiritual is because I like kind of leaving the door open that the corporeal is also spiritual. Like both the noetic and corporeal are just
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
two sides of the same spiritual coin, so that I'm not like relegating the bodily to the non-spiritual. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah, cool.
what was I going to
Yeah.
say? Yeah, the etheric though, I think is more specific. The etheric, if we look at the way that like Steiner and the Theosophists and Indic philosophy, the way this is usually chopped up is that you've got the what you could call the somatic or the physical, the mineral is what Steiner calls it. Then you've got the etheric, then you've got the astral, then you've got the I. Again, I kind of deviate from Steiner on this because I think the way that he uses the word I creates ambiguities. But I would that fourth layer I would call like the psychical body or something like that, or the ideational layer of our consciousness. Either way, and the etheric within this whole thing, you can actually correlate this, I think, pretty much exactly with the four classical elements, the four classical alchemic and astrological elements, the earth, water, wind, fire, pretty much lines up perfectly with that. And the etheric then would be water. It would be liquid. It would be vital energies. It would be, Steiner says that the etheric is what we share in common with plants. With plants, you have a kind of internalized etheric body, whereas for minerals, the etheric acts externally. So the astral then acts externally upon plants, but it's internalized for lower animals and higher animals and us. And it's the I that really separates us. We have the internalization of the let's say the perspectival consciousness is really the thing I would say that kind of divides us. Or maybe you could say it's the psychical body. Either way, that's the thing that is internal to us, that is there, but external for higher animals like vertebrates, deuterostomes in general, really. Where was I going with this? So yeah, the etheric is like all of these different layers are significant in different ways, but the etheric in particular seems to be significant because of the way that it serves as a kind of mediation between the physical, the mineral, and the and everything else basically. It is that which mediates between the bodily and the rest of the cosmos. And so it makes a lot of sense that that would be really significant within the Christ narrative, because the redemption of the bodily is kind of the one of the core motifs here, if not the core motif.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also
Practical terms, right? Like what does it mean for like what would a human being look like with etherized blood? I'm not sure. I'm
yeah.
still
Well,
kind of
this is, remember I said there was two things, and this I think bridges nicely into the second. Um, However, one thing quick before going there is um what is oh, man, I lose the thoughts so quickly because just new ones keep flying in. Um
I'm no longer blaming Virgo. I'm now blaming the lunar eclipse
yeah,
that is occurring. I'll
yeah,
blame something else later on, but here, continue.
yeah. Um Uh, okay, I think I'm gonna. Okay, do you remember what you said right before the what would a human being look like? Like talking about the
Yeah, the mediating function between the ether and
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I
the
was gonna
other.
say it's
Yeah.
also interesting how the etheric is perhaps implicated or to do with time as well, right? How it's like a uh there's it's a temporal. Have you heard Steiner talking about that? Like he says that like the etheric body is fundamentally a temporal thing, and like I think it has to do it connects with what you said about possibility spaces somehow, where like there's all the possible, like for example, the tree, the etheric body of the acorn is also containing the future tree,
Mm.
and um so that was one thought that came there. That's an interesting thing. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
so
if you
you could maybe see it like the etheric contains the future in the same way that the mineral contains the past, or you could see it as maybe the better way to look at it would be like this: like the mineral um, mediates the past, the astral mediates the future, because that's like behavioral patterns and drives, impulses, desires, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then the etheric could be seen as kind of like mediating between those two. So it's actually bringing the past and the future into conjunction, and you need that conjunction in order to really have time
Hmm.
itself. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what Steiner says, but I can see where he's going with that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to think about it like that as we go up the levels, it becomes increasingly eternal. Um, and then um, there's a lot of yeah. I didn't really want to press too much into this, so it was more so just kind of a passing thought about how there's also, I think, a time element at play. Um, the um, so in terms of what would a etherized human look like, I think that this is actually what Steiner was talking about with the eurythmy, such that
Hmm.
he was there was at least one talk in which he said
Eurythmy rests on the following principles. We have an organ through which the etheric body is prompted into activity, so that the physical body becomes an image of the etheric. This is the case when we speak. But it is not the whole physical body, but the air that is an image of the etheric. The sounding word in the air, the way that the air vibrates, is a direct expression of the etheric. If one now takes hold of what lives in the sound, in the word, and extends it to the whole etheric body, and then lets both hands and feet move as the air is moved quite naturally in speaking and singing, then one has eurythmy. For eurythmy is a speaking of the whole human being, so that the help not only of the moving air, but of the human organs is called upon. You can see from such a matter on how universal and all-encompassing a scale the involvement of spiritual science in modern culture is conceived. Eurythmy will become something that is quite general, for evolution does not reach its goal through moving forward in a one-sided way. The etheric body of the larynx performs a distinct eurythmy, intimately connected with the normal development of our respiratory system. In the movements of eurythmy, the whole human being becomes a sense organ. What otherwise remains an experience of the ear or larynx only, now has to become an experience of the whole human being. When it becomes an experience of the whole human being, it quite naturally becomes gesture.
the human being becomes an image of the etheric. Um, while doing, I could find the exact clip, but he's basically said a bunch how these higher levels, I think most primarily the etheric would be kind of made visible, maybe not in its completeness, but in the way that you can think about like an image of a hologram, or like an image of a like you are an image of your guardian angel, or you are an image of your eschatological self, or something like that.
Yeah.
Such that like you can kind of see through the person to, not that you're still seeing them, but uh I'm not sure if that makes sense, but um I hesitate here because I wish I could articulate it perfectly, because I have this intuitive sense that Steiner was very much onto something in that respect, and it really blew my mind when I first actually discovered that he was really into this eurythmy thing, because that's what I've been raving about for many years now, like very similarly.
So
Yeah.
two things here, I would say. One, so the idea of like images, that's something that we could, because that reminds me of Bergson and his description of matter, quote unquote, as being kind of virtual images, is the way he puts it. Like you can think of like the surface of a body as a like range of potential images or potential
Yeah. Yeah.
contacts, or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's that, because that definitely indicates that some kind of connection with the etheric, because the surfaces of physical bodies are fundamentally electromagnetic in nature. That's what actually comes into contact when physical things come into contact with one another. It also indicates a connection with light, which is significant here. There's definitely an isomorphism there, if not a direct identity. And another thing that's probably worth mentioning here is the cyclical nature of the etheric, right? The way that
Yeah.
there's this kind of linearity to the astral in a way. Like the astral can be like, this is the goal, and we're going from point A to point B. The etheric doesn't really work that way. The etheric is more, it has more of this kind of circular thing going on, and you see that like in plants, for example. Goethe shows this, the way that a plant kind of grows up, and the way that it produces its leaves and stems. Yeah, it
Mhm.
spirals, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, with flower petals, you have a radial symmetry. You see this with animals that have this kind of flora type nature to them. Things like echinoderm, starfish, corals, that kind of thing. Hydras, cnidarians, if you want to use that, the
Big fancy words.
biological terminology.
Yeah.
So on that note, how much time you got left?
I'm in no particular. I got nothing planned tonight. Yeah.
I like desperately need to take a restroom
Yeah.
break.
Yeah.
Let's
Sounds
pause for
good.
just a minute and
Sure.
then
Yeah.
come back to it. Okay.
All right. I don't know if this is recording. Yes, recording. I have to remember what Steiner has said about eurythmy. He said a lot about eurythmy. Let's just put that out there.
And we're back. All right. So, yeah, got all kinds of things to riff on now. We've got light, we've got cyclicity, we've got the mediation between past and future. We've got images, we got water. There's a lot going on within the
Yeah.
etheric for sure.
Yeah. Another thing, I mean, there's lots of, I've made a bunch of videos. I have a playlist of videos about eurythmy. Pretty much, they're all pretty much, I think, almost all Steiner clips talking about eurythmy. And some things are coming to mind about what he said, but also, I also wanted to say, um, thinking about the images, the way that I tend to think about it, um, have you read Galahad's article about constellation with the cube?
Constellation with a Q.
Constellation, no, constellation with the cube and like the Rubik's cube. Do you
Oh, the
remember him?
Q. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Me and him talked about that quite a bit, actually. Yes, I
Oh
read
yeah.
that. And yeah, we talked about that quite a bit. I think one of the conclusions I came to in that conversation is that the and I forget the line of logic exactly. This is a very long email exchange, but the cube is associated with Saturn. Of course, you've got the hexagon with the, that whole spiel. But like, if the cube could then be correlated with physicality and the inertia and foundational qualities of matter, then you can associate that then with Capricorn, and then maybe then with the octahedron. Then you could correlate that with Aquarius. And
That's gonna
there's
take me. I'm gonna have to listen to that back. That's gonna take me some steps to follow those steps. I think the way that I connected to Aquarius is through the idea of the black box, such that like the black box is the technology that is unconscious and it becomes the New Jerusalem, the golden cube.
Mhm.
So that's how I've connected to Aquarius. But I don't know, because it's Aquarius is a technological thing as well. But this is a huge thing, and I don't want to. I think we might have to like, I don't know, talking about Galahad and stuff. I think maybe that's also another kind of, I don't know. It seems a little ominous to go into that on the lunar eclipse night or something. I don't know, but but yeah, I bring it up just to say that that's the way I really found that compelling way to think about the idea of the images, such that the every Rubik's cube is an image of the perfect cube, right? And also I had an experience in 2017 when I first had this big dispatch, is the term I would use now, about visual, let's say, right brain language. Um, Accompanying that was a vision of a cube with an eye in the center of each face. And it wasn't until literally this past year that I was able to see how the cube connected. And I think it's basically an image of how eurythmy works, which is that we are an image, always a moving image, and through the patterned sequences, changes of our body, which happen I would say a syntactical, almost algebraic, mathematical type of.
An event must be symbolically coherent before it can be physically possible. These simple facts result in an emergent principle which I call the conservation of identity. This law, I propose, is what causes symbolism, and intelligibility more broadly, to manifest in physical space and time.
There is a law and order to, the which thing comes next in my being, but they are all, if we can see them in this kind of holographic, iconic way, they're all images of the cube that is our eschatological self or our etheric being, or something like that. And it's crazy because, and that's, I mean, shout out Galahad. Like I kind of got on his nerves a bit because I was being totally crazy psycho about this, Tim. Hopefully it makes a little bit of sense, but but yeah, like shout out to him for kind of helping me put those pieces together, at least to the degree that I have so far, however that may be. But so that's my thinking about this idea of the images and the eurythmy. So please, I'm very curious, kind of what's running through your head.
Oh geez, okay. Yeah,
Oh,
so the cube, well, let's break a couple of things down real quick. So the cube and the eyes, and you were connecting the cube with the eschaton. Now I can definitely see that in terms of the cube as representative of materiality and therefore of completeness and solidity. And so the sense that the eschaton is representative of a kind of finality. I could definitely see the connection there. But you mentioned images again. Can it connect some dots for me here? Like, what is in
yeah, okay,
the cube? Yeah.
gotcha. I think I misspoke actually. Obviously, we can never find a perfect image to image to describe like how this works, but the Rubik's cube I think gets very close. But one thing is that the teleological object, which is the perfect cube, is still a cube. But in that instance, the way that he framed it, I'm not sure if you remember, if you read this part, was that I also hope he doesn't mind me talking about this, but
Too
it's
late
like
now.
yeah, it's true. It's but the was the octahedron inside of the cube, right?
Yeah.
And such that the points touch in the center of each face where the eyes happen to be, and um such that the eschatological you is always shining through and the way that I frame it is that it's always shining through your eyes. And this is kind of a step, a leap that maybe we would have to talk about a bit more or something, or maybe incorrect, but I think there's a way in which that higher dimensional you is always shining through your eyes, and but there's a way where we can solve the cube so our whole body becomes, and yeah, it's wonderful.
Hellraiser had it right the whole time.
How so? I'm
Hellraiser with the cubes, and you get
yeah,
a
yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. He was, yeah,
I mean, I'm kind of
dude,
joking, but there's actually some interesting metaphysical ideas in Hellraiser.
yeah.
It's been
Well, yeah, Gal has used, he's pulled images from that for his articles and stuff. Yeah, it's
for sure, for sure. So yeah, yeah, that reminds me a lot of the I can't Latin, so I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, but it's the Mysterium Cosmographica, I think is what it's called. It was Kepler's thing where it was like you had the different Platonic solids nested within one another, and he was using that as like a model of the solar system, which is a really neat idea because
yeah,
what's crazy about that, of course, modern science just kind of like throws an image of that in a textbook, like, oh, look at what these silly people believed back
yeah,
before we had fucking general relativity or whatever. But like that lines up to within 10% of what the actual orbits of the planets,
really,
which is kind of wild. That I mean,
truly,
that's pretty damn close. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously, but it makes you think like,
very,
could you finagle that extra 10% and make it work somehow? I mean, did we just
yeah,
give up on that? And maybe that's something that should have been pursued. I mean, it's an
yeah,
interesting thought.
super interesting. Yeah, no, I'm super glad you said that. Um, yeah, it reminds me as well of this. I'm not sure if you've seen this guy who recently showed up on the YouTube scene. Shared Story, I think is his channel name. He's he has this image of a cosmogram of his own or something of the sort.
More
I'm not sure.
competition. I'm gonna have to up my game. But go ahead, go ahead. Show me what the stakes are. It's okay. I'll blow them all out of the water. No biggie.
Hey man, yeah, we're
This motherfucker thinks
that's
his
fucking
sigil thingy's cooler than mine.
that's fucking hilarious.
I'm gonna debate him. Debate me, bro. Debate me the shared story.
Yeah. So he's made reference to Galahad as well, talking about in his he's made reference. He said it wasn't until I found Galahad's work that it seems there's other people as well who have had experiences like this. So yeah, I think there are many in this respect.
Circular,
And
colorful sigil thingies for profile pictures is my thing, motherfucker.
oh, I'm very glad you said that because I had something I wanted to tell you about that, which is it just as far out as everything we've been saying so far. So anyway, he's got this chart thing,
And I'm hoping we can agree that this is a truth.
and it's you can see the platonic solids here, so it came to mind as you were speaking.
Oh, it's the chakras.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't done a deep dive, but I've watched some of his stuff and it certainly caught my attention, that's just for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's sorry, oh. Um yeah, so another thing, I wrote the S, but I didn't finish writing the word. What were we just the other thing that came to mind? I don't remember what it was.
I'm gonna pull out that big ol' where did it go? That gigantic like cosmogony thing that I cooked up. Is it this one?
Yeah. Okay, yes. That's what I was gonna say, which is that
Close my tab so that no one
this
sees
feels
anything
this definitely
incriminating.
this definitely feels like biting off more than I can address today, and I hope nobody will jump to conclusions,
We're,
especially
we're, we're leaning into that lunar eclipse
yeah,
energy.
we really are. How much
We're going into uncharted territory where we're
True.
gonna stare at images and talk out of our buttholes. Let's see. There we go. There we go.
Let's see.
All right. So, oh geez, I hate the way the screen sharing thing works. Ah. Why does it do this? There we go. Okay. Can I full screen it? How do I full screen it?
I have
There
my
we go. All righty. So can you see that?
yes.
Okay, so well, first of all, this is what I was talking about before with that thing where there's like atom Cadmon and then it
Yeah,
like
yeah.
splits and then it splits and then it splits. I screwed up the color coding on this thing though, and it really bothers me. And I'm gonna have to go through and recolor code the whole damn thing because
I'm so into charts. I just want to say that I love freaking charts like this.
look, I
And
was thinking that so this would be like earth and then water and then air and then fire. And I was thinking that earth should be green because like plants grow out of the fucking ground and they're green. And this would be like water, so it should be blue. But I was wrong. I was wrong. This should be green. This should be blue. And that matters. It's not just color coding because if I had actually done this right, then it would create a spectrum that goes across the color wheel from Neptune to Pluto.
I see.
And that's a big deal because that correlates with, so the Pluto then that would represent the incorporation of the psychical body, so this part into the human biological organism. And that would be the thing that would be the break between us and the other higher animals. And then this would also connect with, first of all, Stanislav Grof's perinatal matrices, right? With Pluto representing the kind of like the separation of the infant in the womb from the womb itself, right? And it would correlate with what we talked about last time with that Jupiter-Pluto opposition, which what's his name correlated with the death of Christ, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So those things are all connected. See, the colors matter. It's not just color coding. It's not just to make it look pretty. Like this is actually like, I mean, this is what I'm doing here. I mean, this whole shebang, what I'm doing is I'm trying to take my ideas and Steiner's ideas and kind of weave them together into something. But the thing is, in doing that, what I've came to see is that really Steiner's whole shtick is he was trying to take Goethe's color theory and make it into an entire spiritualistic cosmology. I mean, literally, that was, I mean, everything refers back to Goethe's color theory. But the problem is that, and this is going to be something I'm going to talk about at length later on in some future videos, but the problem here is that it's not Goethe, Steiner was missing the outer planets. He only had Saturn. He didn't have Pluto or Neptune or Uranus because he thought that the solar system effectively ended at Saturn. And so he was missing the concept of transcendental darkness, which is something you do see in Goethe. It's the significance of Goethe's realization that darkness is more than the mere absence of light. We see it in Meister Eckhart with the Abground and all that. So anyway, that I think is the key. I think that's the thing that Steiner's missing. But anyway, if we come over here and look at this shit, so this should be green, which annoys me to no end, but this would be the etheric, right? And this would also be the etheric. So you could think of the etheric like there's the spiritual side of the etheric, and then there's like the etheric body, right? And so like this produces this, and then the memories of this are then spiritualized up into this to give shape to these kind of composite images, which are the spiritual contents themselves, the auras, which then become kind of structured on the basis of these eternal objects or orphenomen, which would be up here at the top in the what Gebser would call the anachronon, you could call it the Platonic world of forms. So anyway, this is significant. This seems to be the key somehow, and we are here. We are right after the turn. So the perspectival consciousness is that was the internalization of pure subjectivity itself into the human sense of ego, of individual, of into the interior of the self world membrane boundary type of thing. So that perspectival age is that's what we're at the tail end of right now. That was the direct consequence of the Christ event, and we're entering into this. So, yeah, that.
I see.
So what's the significance of the etheric here then? Like, what would be? I don't know. I don't know. I could keep rambling about this, but well, I mean, if we look right here, I mean, if we that diagram is just a more complicated version of this. The upswing should bring us into the etheric, right? Because that blue is etheric. So this is really derived from Arthur Young's thing, right? So the way he does it, he's like, well, there's light, and then there's particles, and then there's atoms, and then there's molecules, and then we move up into like flora and fauna, and finally human beings. But I don't think Arthur Young was right about many of the details, frankly, but he got the overall structure right, I think. And what that highlights then here is that the upswing, the first stage of the upswing is the etheric. And so what that would imply then, I think what it would imply is that I'm missing something in this diagram, actually, because this is still red, so this is still psyche, right? So the reason it's like that is because if you look over here, if we're moving up through these different layers, so this would be the like mental, like axial age consciousness, and then this one in the middle would be like the modern post-Renaissance perspectival consciousness, and we are here. But that would be kind of an inversion of this, right? Because it starts at the green and then moves up to the red, and this starts at the red and moves down to the green. So there should be another like V shape pointed downward here that I don't have. And that is what would reveal that etheric aspect of the upswing.
Interesting that when you get two pyramids, you could also, by overlapping them a bit, you could create an octahedron.
Yeah.
I was just reminded of that. Kind of interesting. Yeah, this is very interesting to me, and I've been meaning to dig into it more so, but I have not done so. So this is also very new to me and kind of a lot to process immediately, but it's like but very interesting, and like yeah, I definitely think you're onto something.
Well, so if we look at that the upside down V, so that's representing the human ego going through these different phases, which correspond to the different phases of the evolution of human civilization. And so it's moving upward. So this is Gebser's narrative of like the archaic structure, and then the magical, and then the mythical, and then the mental, perspectival, and so forth. So that's an upside down V. We need a right side up V too, that corresponds to something else. And whatever that is, that's going to be the thing that cracks the code of the etherization of the blood. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that yet, because I'm literally thinking these things through right now, being recorded on camera. So hi, everybody. This is how my brain works.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the kind of the foray into the world of Sir Formscapes. It's very, very interesting. I mean, yeah, there's something yeah, I think what would be best in terms of like this really, super far out I don't know what word to use, but cutting edge perhaps. Theorizing. I might have to listen back to what's been said and get to that. However, there was another thing about your work and your pictures. This is super lunar eclipse vibes. But I think it's interesting where I'm gonna actually do it. I'm gonna do it live here. We're doing it live. I'm gonna open the cosmogram, or Galahad's cosmogram, I should say. This came to mind particularly when you were talking about how the outer planets hadn't been incorporated yet. I'm not sure if you saw my recent video about, I think this is with tons of respect towards Griffin, and I really have no beef against him. But I think perhaps the astrological glyphs down here in the original version of the cosmogram were there for, that there's something there. And basically, I'm thinking maybe there's something like this going on. Because my goal is really a synthesis of all this stuff. And
You got it pulled up. Share your screen. I can see the.
oh, you can't see it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What can you see? Am I sharing the screen?
No.
What the heck?
I don't understand.
That's such a letdown, man. Zoom really thwarting my thing. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here it comes. Ready? This. I think there might be something like this going on.
Aha. There we go. Yes. Oh, so me and oh shit. Me and Griffin already talked about. Oh no, it went away.
I can put it back. Yep.
So I made some images merging these two together when me and him talked about this. So here's what you do. You shrink this down a little bit and you rotate it so the sun lands on Tiferet and the moon lands on Yesod.
Ah, yes, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And then when you do that,
yeah, and you would also have to flip it horizontal so that this is on this way. You'd have to do this as well.
I think the conclusion we came to is that you can you can do it either way, because it shows you different things depending on whether it's one way or the other.
Bro.
Yeah, you end up with this thing where you
Dude.
kind of draw a line. If you draw like a line cutting.
Look at this. Look at this color matching, dude.
I know,
I'm
right. If you if you draw a line cutting through like right along the sun and then going down to the right side of the moon, now you've got the sun associated with the what I would call the radiant planetary archetypes. So the ones that are associated with divine form, divine transcendence, right?
Oh my God, dude.
Right. And so then these end up over here with the resurrection.
With the white paisley.
Right, right. And then on the other side, you've got the moon, and then you've got the abyssal archetypes. And those are over here with the Grail and the birth and Yaldabaoth or Ahriman, whatever. And so Lucifer's on the other side. And what happens is if you take that diagonal and you put it the other way, when the moon corresponds to those upper radiant archetypes, Venus, Uranus, Neptune, and so forth, that then is the Luciferic because it's an inversion. And then the sun associated with those abyssal archetypes, Pluto and Mars and Saturn, that is the Ahrimanic, so it's also a kind of inversion in a way, right? And so that's what's going on here. And if you look at this in context of the music theory stuff I was doing, those are the Locrian scales, right? Which are the ones that's the most dissonant scales.
Oh,
So,
dude,
yeah.
very cool. I'm
Yeah.
definitely,
I could sit here and stare at this for just like hours and
yeah,
like pick apart all the
for
symbolism.
real.
I love
Me
it.
too, man. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of, as I mentioned, I kind of, um, bothered Griffin with all of my constant raving about this stuff. But I hope I hope he, and I'm curious about your conversation with him further, but I don't know how much is, shareable in this respect or anything, and like how, you know, I would love to see this conversation continue is really what I'm trying to say. And um, yeah, it's super interesting because, of course, to my mind, it's like I'm also thinking about astrology when I look down here.
Well, here's another thing
And
though. Think about this. What if we did oh, how do you pronounce it? The clip off as well. Like we took that tree of life and we did the double thing as well, right? Because what I'm thinking is this. Here, let me share my screen real quick. I'm
okay,
gonna pull some
um,
up.
maybe one quick thing in terms of the scales.
Mhm.
Uh, this is the don't lose your thought because I'm very curious, but
No, no,
uh,
you're good.
this this is the chart for right now, and with some planets removed. Uh, and while I was setting this up, I was also thinking about other aspect sets. We usually use mainly these aspect sets. However, because of Griffin's cosmogram, where he had the septagrams, the seven pointed stars down in the Ouroboros, there, I started playing around with septiles and quintiles. Um, Septiles, I did not, I'm fumbling. This is aspects by septile. So here's one, for example. This is in the cosmogram you have, these lines are biseptiles, so it's 2/7, you see?
Yeah.
And so this is a 2/7 here. This is just for example. I don't think this one's particularly, of course, anything can be relative importance, I suppose, but this is just one that happens to be active right now. And it made me think about you in terms of the we're talking about whole tone scales mostly with 12 notes, right? But I wonder about maybe other kind of ways and perhaps or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there are different kinds of equal division of octave tunings that could potentially be relevant here because that's the one thing that you don't get out of the Pythagorean tradition until much later in the game is these more complex like microtonal divisions of the octave, like 31 Edo is a relatively common one. There are also like microtonal just intonation systems, and so if we started taking those and incorporating them into all this, then yeah, you could get all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah, I'll show you this real
Sure, yeah.
quick. This is
There hasn't been too much said about the septiles in terms of their astrological significance, but I've noticed that there is something of a more kind of ethereal vibe with them or something like that. But just for lack of a better word, um, yeah.
yeah.
Please do share.
Yeah. So this is just something I did where I took that kind of double hourglass thing, which was really kind of well, it represents a number of things, but it's the different ontological strata of well, the human organism, but also just reality itself, I would say. And what I did here is I took like the tree of life, and I had to finagle it. Because of simply just as a matter of the way that the hourglass was when I started working on this, I had to kind of like break apart the tree of life and make it into a, like, the geometry isn't quite right, but it could be right. Like I could do a regular tree of life and then just make the layers like
Mm.
spaced out differently or stretched out or whatever, and it would still work. But
Mhm.
either way, if you took this and then started like basically thinking of this upper part as like kind of incorporating the other elements of Galahad's cosmogram into it, and then down here have basically a kind of inverted cosmogram.
Yeah, and that's what you haven't. Okay, I'm following now. All of a sudden, it clicks where, in the cosmogram, you have in the original version at least, you have the angels on the upward side of the Ouroboros and the demons on the downward side, right? That's always been so fascinating to me. Like, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, like playing around with these diagrams, like
yeah,
I mean,
I love the visual outlays. This is, nothing in comparison, but I made a little chart that comes to mind. I kind of want to share it with you just because we're
yeah,
chatting about it real quick.
have
This
at it.
is um my fumbling. This this one here. I made this chart a while back. It's like a intro to astrology. It's designed for mobile viewing, such that you would have to zoom in. Um, and it's like all the basic astrological stuff. I love the charts, man. I keep the charts up, please. It's like it's so much fun messing around with them.
For sure. Well, my brain feels like it's
Yeah.
swollen, so I guess
Yeah, I
we'll
feel
go
like
ahead and
I feel like we've, turned over a number, probably enough rocks for one evening, like just
what we did in this is we like opened up a number of
yeah,
cans of worms all at the same time that we can try and
yeah,
pick back up on later after we've actually had time to think about it. So I'm going to consider that time well spent. Thank
yeah,
you
man. Yeah,
for
same to you.
chatting with me, and yeah,
Yeah, same to you, man. I'm feeling like I'll probably listen back and probably have more ideas on stuff. So if you're keen to talk, I'd love to keep it going.
yeah,
And
absolutely. Let's try and do this again sometime. Hopefully next week. I don't know what my schedule is gonna be looking like, but let's maybe try and do it
same.
next week or the week after next, maybe if we can manage it.
Cool, man. Cool. I wish you a good, we've got about 40 minutes until Clips goes Zach. I hope you'll be able to see it. And I want the world to see this. This is
Yeah, I'm gonna let you
yeah,
do all the editing. I'm literally just gonna throw it in my thingy and like finagle the audio so that it sounds balanced, and
perfect.
then I'll
Yeah,
just send it straight to you. So I should be able
cool.
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.